Hey folks, thanks for joining me for this episode from Embellish Pod, an opportunity for me to ramble about whiskey or something for a few minutes. If you got here by chance, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. Hopefully, I can be found on any podcasting platform that exists, and if you can't find me on a platform, send me an email at embellishpod@gmail.com. I'll try to get that taken care of. You can also find video versions of this podcast on YouTube. You can find all of my links on Instagram at embellishpod or TikTok with the same handle. I have a website. It is www.embellishpod.com, and it's also a place to pick up these links, episode details, and more. The whiskey podcasting community is both large and small, and I've had some good friends get the chance to talk with the folks from Old Line Spirits already. And I'll say I've been a little bit jealous of them since they got this opportunity. So today it is my turn. Today I'll be welcoming Mark from Old Line to the podcast. I have the opportunity to have Mark from Old Line join me. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce your last name, without you saying it first. So, if you would just kind of give me, a quick elevator speech on Mark and Old Line Spirits.
Sure. Well, thanks, John. I'm glad to be here. Mark McLaughlin, but I'll take anything. But I am one of the co-founders of Old Line Spirits here in Baltimore, Maryland. And my business partner, Arch Watkins, wasn't able to join me today. But he and I started Old Line. I guess we incorporated as business almost 10 years ago. And we set out originally to make bourbon and rye whiskey for all the reasons that anybody would. They're wonderful categories, truly American spirits. But we found ourselves actually very shortly after we set out on this journey, having an opportunity to learn how to make whiskey from two gentlemen on the West Coast. And they were making this amazing American single malt whiskey in Northwest Washington State, in a very tiny little town called Bow, Washington on Sandwich Island. So, we fell in love with what they were doing. We had a veteran connection. We're, Iraq, Afghanistan vets, they're Vietnam vets. And, ultimately we went out there and kind of learned from Bob and took over the business and relocated it back home to Baltimore. And here we are, trying to be, we feel like we are one of the earliest adopters and on the front of the wave here for ASM with a bunch of other great distilleries.
So you just mentioned this, and this is one of the questions I have. You relocated a distillery from the West Coast effectively to the East Coast. Like, do you just stick that in a U-Haul and drive? Like, is there some, like, what is that logistically like?
That is no kidding, exactly what we did. So it's hard to describe how small Golden Distillery was. It was, in a small barn, which is even a generous term, like between a barn and a garage on Bob's property. And really, this was two guys in their retirement years making whiskey that they wanted to drink and selling some to make a few bucks. But it was really a passion project, much more than a kind of going concern business, so to speak. So this thing, it was tiny. It was a 60-gallon still, which is maybe stands a little taller than me. Let's say it's maybe 6.5 feet tall. I'm 6'2", so it's a little taller than me. And 156 or something at the time. They were using small barrels, 10-gallon barrels. So we packed up when it was time to buy the business and relocate it after we apprenticed. All the barrels went intermodal in a Connex container. Everything else, all the assets we purchased is still, the basic, very rudimentary equipment, little tiny mash tuns. Those all fit into a 26-foot U-Haul. And I did a little cannonball run across the country with those, with a stop in Kentucky, actually, to get our still modified from open flame to electric. Yeah, and that's our little still. If you come visit, you'll see it here. We have it on display, but almost immediately after moving to Baltimore, we're in 25,000 square feet here, so we've built it out. So we're a much bigger operation now. But yeah, it was much easier to relocate than you might imagine, given how small it was.
I can imagine, you've got to cross a mountain at some point in time, and driving a U-Haul with a still in it's got to be a little bit scary or sketchy. How do you get to the point to where you and a friend decide that you're going to start up a whiskey business together? Like, how does this happen?
Yeah. So, really, I think that I'd say it probably was born for me out of actually dissatisfaction with my previous job. So, my path after college and Arch's, both, we went to different colleges, but we both ended up in the Navy, and we were naval flight officers. So we would think of Goose and Top Gun. We were the guy that managed the weapon system, the navigator, that sort of thing. And we both loved the Navy. Was the best thing that ever happened to me. I think Arch would say the same thing. Loved every minute of it. Well, not every minute, but loved it. And after 10 years, I chose to get out to go to grad school, got my MBA, and became an investment banker. And that was, while I learned a lot and met a lot of really good people there, it was really not something that I felt compelled to do. It was I was kind of doing it for the wrong reasons. I think I didn't really like it. I was doing it to make a few bucks, and I was very unhappy. So for me, it was I kind of have to get how do I get out of this? And if I'm going to jump out of this career that I'm in, uh, for the reason that I'm so dissatisfied and don't like it, well, what can I do that would be something I really do want to do? Like, this is an opportunity to not just go to something slightly less bad, but to really embrace what I want my future to be. And I've always wanted to own a business. I love the kind of the lore and the romance behind making a product, like a whiskey, and that you have to make it and age it, and it's kind of a romance and an excitement to that. And the market was just starting to really bloom as far as craft spirits. So all those things came together, and my wife saw how unhappy I was, and she's a person who really values stability. So that's a really testament to her that when I said I want to quit my job to do this, and she supported me, it was not easy for her to do, but she did. So that's kind of how I quit and my job and moved into this. And then Arch, he enjoyed his career. He was an engineer, so he wasn't dissatisfied per se. But I think when I made this jump a few weeks later, he starts kicking around the idea. He's like, "Hey, man, you want a partner?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So I think this kind of scratched an itch for him as something he wanted to do with his life. So it was just, I'm thankful that I disliked my old job so much that it forced me to do this, because it really forced me to go my own way.
Yeah, and I've had this conversation with my children, as people often do. You can either work for money to do something that you're passionate about, right, outside of work, or you can work for something that you're passionate about and hope that you can find a way to make it profitable.
Fair.
And it
Yeah.
feels like that's kind of the direction you've taken. Is you found a thing that you were passionate about, but also found a way to make it work monetarily speaking. And so Old Line really focuses pretty heavily in the American single malt realm. And you said you kind of have this old still, but you've effectively archived it. It is now a
Mhm.
historical artifact for you. Do you do all of your production on site, or do have you gone the route of sourcing some of your whiskey?
So we do both. So we don't do all of it on site. Um, when we moved from the West Coast to Baltimore, uh, we had this 25,000 square foot facility that at the time was empty. The short version is it was kind of a nightmare to get open. We had there's all the regulatory stuff that every distillery has to deal with, and we had a couple of real estate issues as well. So it kind of drew this whole process out much longer than we thought. So we had started to work with a company in Columbus, Ohio called Middle West Spirits, originally just to store our barrels and do some initial bottling for us while we got on our feet. And we started to deplete products, but when every month that went by that we weren't making more, our anxiety was growing. That this could only go on so long. And Middle West was willing to work with us as a contract producer, and in a way that at the time, I'm sure this may have changed at the time, that in a way that no one else was willing to do it, in the sense that they were allowing us to use, to give to them, hey, here's our process, that we do in this little 60-gallon still. We want to adapt this to your, 48-inch Vendome column still with 6,000-gallon fermenters. But hey, can you help us through that? And we want it to be our mash bill and our yeast. And we also want to be involved. And Ryan Lang at Middle West, if you haven't met him, you should. He's a phenomenal guy, great company. He was willing to do all those things, and so it allowed us to not only make our product to our spec, but in hindsight, what we didn't realize at the time, one of the big values was that we had learned enough to be dangerous, learning from Bob. Bob is a phenomenal human being and made great whiskey, but Bob was messing around in his retirement years. He wasn't really, he wasn't a chemist by trade. He wasn't, he was doing this for fun, which is great. But the guys at Middle West really helped us kind of professionalize our process, and those are lessons learned that when we started producing here in Baltimore, that we apply to our 300 gallons still here. So the backbone of our production, as far as distillation, is with Middle West, and it will be for the foreseeable future. We love working with them and see no reason to change. But we do small run stuff here, like what becomes our bottled and bonds, our peated, which is a small portfolio for us, but we'll make the peated here. The little bit of rye whiskey that I know we may talk about here in a little bit, a very, very small amount of rye that we do here. So, but most of our emphasis here is on barrel aging, managing that process, any sort of blending we might do, and it's global headquarters of Old Line, so to speak.
Yeah, and so I'm very familiar with Middle West, and they make some very amazing spirits as it is. Right,
Mhm.
their line is fantastic. Um, how did you identify them as a partner for the initial barrel warehousing and bottling, and then subsequently the distillation? Like, how do you just like look up on the internet places I can store barrels, or um, did you already know about them?
So we met them through one of our board members, Richard Wolf, who unfortunately passed away about a year ago. An amazing guy, and he had a deep industry experience, including working for years at Buffalo Trace Sazerac as a general manager of Buffalo Trace Distillery, and then he hung up his own shingle as a consultant, and we met him, and he was at first a consultant and then a consultant slash board member for us until he passed away. Um, Richard knew Ryan well, and so when we were looking for a partner, just kind of in the interim, they came up as a potential option. And one of the reasons that there's other places you can store your barrels, other places you can bottle, but one of the reasons that I think Richard was encouraging us to go to Middle West is that he knew that some sort of contract production was going to be in our future. We all knew it.
Mhm.
We always envisioned it would kind of go the more traditional way, where we max out our existing still and then move to contract to supplement. But because of what I told you before, as far as the real estate issues we had, it forced us to kind of flip that around.
Mhm.
But Richard knew that that was going to be part of our future, and he thought really highly of Ryan and his team. So he just pointed us in that direction, and it was one of the best introductions we've ever had.
And distilling is such a speculative game to begin with, right? Like, you've got to make something, put it in a barrel, hope that it comes out the other side of the barrel really good, but you've got to hold on to it for a period of time. And a lot of people are using contract distilling to get there, um, to make sure they have sufficient quantities on hand for future demand. Uh, When you think about the beginning of old line to now, um, did you expect to be at the success level you are on this time frame, or did you expect it to take longer, shorter?
That's a really good question and a big question. I'd say I'll try to answer it as best I can. I'd say that, like any other business, like there's certain things I think that probably came together a little more quickly than we expected, but most things have been, we had an investor one day say to us, "Hey, guys, you got a great plan here, but this is going to take you twice as long as you think and cost twice as much, because that's just the way it works." And I remember thinking like, "Oh yeah, sure, man, whatever. No, this is airtight." And he's right.
Mhm.
Everything takes twice as long, it costs twice as much, but we find a way. So yeah, I'd say that we are very happy with where we are. But if you asked, 8 years ago, Mark, would I think we'd be in more than 6 markets? Yes. The answer is yes. But but we're happy with where we are. We definitely right now. I think the big thing for us that we want to keep growing our brand, keep making the best whiskey we can, and deepening relationships with whiskey clubs and trendsetters and people who really do care, guys like you that really do care about what companies like us are doing. And when the American single malt category, as that continues to grow, I think our opportunities will grow exponentially with it. So, yeah. So I don't know if that really answered your
Yeah.
question or not.
No, you did, and you touched on two things, and one's going to be the first question, then we'll have another one a couple minutes later. I think you said you're in 6 markets, but what does your distribution look like right now? Like, what states are you in? Where can I go get a bottle? Right?
Sure.
Where can I make sure that I can do this? Is there online offerings? What is that?
Yeah. So, well, I'm actually glad you asked, because we just updated our ecom, but I'll end on that. I'll start with we are distributed in Maryland, D.C., Delaware, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Colorado. For a host of reasons, Colorado is kind of the outlier, but there's several reasons why we get that market a shot early on.
Mhm.
But we've also recently updated our website to integrate more seamlessly with an e-com platform. So people can go to our website, oldlinespirits.com, and click shop and build a basket right there. And everything we endeavor, and right now I think we do have everything that's available here at the distillery where I'm sitting, is available on there for shipping to like 42 states. If you go to the
Mhm.
website, if somebody's in a
Yeah.
state that, Massachusetts is an example where my family is, where I'm from, they can't ship, they can't ship to Massachusetts, but they can ship to most states.
Mhm. So, and then the second part of that was I lost it now. You're in 6 markets. So American single malt, right? So you guys are heavily focused. I mean, that's the primary function here. And American single malt is one of the most interesting segments of whiskey in North America to me right now. And if I had to guess, and I'd be wrong here, but if I had to guess, Colorado playing a heavy role in that is because of beer culture leading into American single malt culture in Colorado. But maybe I'm wrong. But the bigger question is, right? There's some rules that are being proposed that haven't been accepted. I did an episode maybe almost 2.5, 3 years ago when I thought that the regulation was like impending to be done. I'm like, all right, we're about to have an American single malt, and now we're like 3 years later, and it's still not solidified. But
Yeah.
um, you guys are using. I think you're using new charred oak barrels for your American single malt. What makes you make that decision as opposed to using an ex bourbon barrel or non new oak?
Yeah, I love that question. So for us, yeah, you're 100% right that everything that we age and we have a couple of experimental things that we put into second or third use oak just to, get a data point to see, if we're not experimenting, then, we're going to be stagnant. So we have put some new make into things besides virgin oak, just again to see what happens. But everything that we put to market, and 99.9% of what we have in the warehouse is all in virgin oak. And the primary reason that we do that, first of all, that's what Bob and Jim were doing, and that's the whiskey we fell in love with, right? That beautiful combination of what we feel are some of the best things about a single malt Scotch, and some of the best things we think about an American bourbon or American rye. So yeah, we just fell in love with that whiskey, and also I mentioned earlier, Arch and I set out originally to make bourbon and or rye. So, we're American guys. We're American whiskey drinkers. We came up in the world of bourbon and rye as consumers, in our younger years to today. So that always drew us in, that kind of the caramel, the vanilla, the baking spices, all those kind of wonderful things that you get from that virgin oak, or what we want to put in our whiskey. One way I describe it sometimes is we're trying to, you know, deliver a lot of basically all the flavors that a bourbon drinker loves. We're trying to deliver that, but in a very, very different package. So, I
Mhm.
liken it sometimes. I'm not a DJ, but I can imagine a DJ booth with like the levers, make one thing
Mhm.
higher, one thing lower. Like all the levers, for our product and for a bourbon are largely the same. It's just they're at very, very different levels.
Mhm.
And that's the kind of whiskey we like to drink. So that's why we do the virgin oak.
Yeah, and I think there's a high degree of success there, but it's just one of those things that sort of I don't want to say diverges, but it is you're putting yourself in a little bit more of a restriction than the standard American single malt definition that's been proposed is. And then this one's a little more maybe theoretical or whatever, but we have this proposal of a definition, and I think you guys have been a part of that discussion
Mhm.
to some degree. Um, is there any part of that definition that um, you think, "Hey, man, I wish we had done something slightly different with"?
That's a great question. I'd say, and the answer is, I think, pretty much no. I mean, we've been very,
Mhm.
very happy with the way the definitions come together. To your point, yeah, we are part of the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission. We're, one of many, but proud to be part of it. And the only thing and I forget exactly where we landed on this. Honestly, there was the last kind of discussion point that I recall coming up was whether uh, American single malt should be allowed to use artificial coloring.
Mhm.
And I forget where we landed on that. My opinion was, we don't use it. We don't, I mean, our stuff's in virgin oak anyway. It's got plenty of color.
Right.
I believe my personal opinion was, hey, yeah, sure, why not? Like if somebody wants to use it, the Scots can use it. It doesn't change the
Mhm.
flavor. And honestly, I forget where we landed on that one, but I wasn't really hard up either way because it doesn't really affect old line at all,
Mhm.
and I don't think it negatively affects the industry either way. But yeah, for the most part, everything that has been decided upon, we've been supportive of, and it's very helpful that we already were preemptively adhering to all those guidelines. So it made it really easy for us to support because it
Right.
didn't cost us to change anything we're doing. But what I love about it is that it's not trying to recreate Scotch as that's clear.
Mhm.
And I love that it's Scotch and bourbon and rye and all these things are very highly defined for very, very good reason. These long-standing amazing categories of whiskey that really want to protect what that category is, and that's, I think, makes complete sense in the all the sense in the world. American single malt's new, and we want to make sure that we leave it. We as a group of producers leave it defined enough to protect the category, so we don't have somebody coming in there doing something really wacky and kind of hurting the name, but also wide enough where we can have innovation and really kind of find our own way. And I think that the commission did a really good job of kind of keeping it the swim lane really, really appropriate.
Yeah, and I think the only person that I've the only comment that I've had from anyone who has been a part of the discussion that said, the only thing they might tweak is instead of it being 100% malted barley, it's just 100% malted grain, right? And so it could be any single grain that's 100% of that, right? So if you have 100% malted rye or 100% malted corn, that would still fall in the American single malt thing, but that also leads to too broad of palate difference, right? And so
Sure.
if you don't know specifically it's malted corn versus malted rye versus malted barley, those are all three going to be three wildly different whiskeys. But
100%.
they could
Yeah.
still fall in the same definition.
And I agree. I'm very glad we kept it at malted barley. Not that you can't have amazing whiskeys that are made with all these other grains, but in my opinion, I'm glad we kept it with the malted barley. I think that was kind of a really important anchor point in my mind.
Yeah, and so you said that they're on site. You guys are doing your blending. How do you go about building your blends, right? And so you have kind of two standard offerings that are out there. You have the American Single Malt that is the flagship, and then it's the I'm trying to look at the label that was written here, and it's tiny. The Navy Strength. Yeah, so you have these two. I assume the flavor profiles are supposed to be as similar as possible, just kind of varying off of cask. But how do you build your blends?
Sure. So for us, to your last point there, distilleries do it differently than each other. Some distilleries have their regular kind of proof and their high proof, maybe different age or some sort of different profile. We have opted. We've messed around with that concept, but for us, we've opted that the only difference between our Navy Strength and our 95 proof is simply the proofing. That it keeps it very, very similar, very close, but nicely different. It's kind of that enough air or light between the two that I think keep them nicely separated, but still definitively siblings, if not what do you call it? Non-identical twins. That's probably a little too close. But,
yeah.
But so that's what we wanted to do there. So, but yeah, for us, as far as what goes into those two products, it's going to be a blend of 4, 5, and 6. Actually, 4, 5, 6, and 7-year-old 53-gallon number 4 char barrels. And for us, a couple ways we do this. So, with a smaller distillery, and a growing distillery, I think consumers understand and expect that there's going to be some, movement over time as we continue to dial in really, what is the best flavor profile we can find. And we're really, I think we're pretty much there now. Might move a little bit, but really not much. So to maintain consistency, we have a 3,000-gallon blending tank, and we don't let that get below 25% or so. So there's always a little bit of that the last batch in there to help with consistency. And then it's at figuring out, tasting samples of different 4, 5, and 6-year-old barrels and 7-year-old barrels to come up with what we feel is, for this particular point in time, the right ratio to get this flavor profile. So, I'll just make up some things. The next one maybe will be, hey, maybe we have a lot of 5-year in there for whatever reason, and a lot of 7, but not a lot of 4 and 6. But that might not be the same ratio the next time we do it. So there's got to be that person in the loop, that kind of blending, and that person in the loop is our distiller Jerry, my business partner Arch, and I jump in with an opinion here and there. So, so it's basically you're working with a moving target. So it takes that kind of hand holding to achieve that consistency, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious, as you're kind of developing these, do you hold back a bottle from each blend and say, all right, we're kind of seeing what our drift is if we're staying really close to our profile, and then how does that compare against the original spirit that you kind of began with, right, in smaller barrels and whatnot?
We absolutely do keep those samples. That's I think that's a very good practice, and we certainly do. And the product now is meaningfully different from the original stuff for a couple of reasons, and all of which are deliberate. Is that I mentioned earlier that Bob and Jim were using 10-gallon barrels to age, and that was really tricky to use. Now they ended up coming out with a product that I think was very, very good. More than very good. It was excellent, but still, there's only so far a small barrel will take you, in my humble opinion. So we immediately, when we took over the business, started phasing out small barrels, and so we went into, got rid of the 10s. We were filling 30s. When with those mature, we emptied 30s. But all the while, we had been putting down 53s to ultimately get to where we are now to use the American Standard barrel. And that the profile has changed a number of times. Actually, the biggest jump it made might have been the most recent one, because the 30s and the 10s, they kind of, I mean, the 30s I think are better, but they kind of trend a little bit together as far as flavor profile. But the 30s to 53s, that was a big leap, and it was definitely a leap in a great direction. But I was concerned because, even though I think most people think it's even better than it was, it's different, and people who get behind a certain thing might be a little bit annoyed or unsettled that, wait a minute, this is what's happened here, what's changed. Luckily, we've had a really good response from it. So, but we do. So right now, I think that consistency has become more important to us, because in the past couple of years, we knew there was going to be that change as the 10s went away and the 30s went away. And we were finished depleting stuff that came off the 60-gallon pot still, and we started incorporating stuff that came off the stuff at Middle West. All those things we knew were going to happen. So we've always kept that library, but now I think really in the past year or so is where that library becomes a lot more relevant, because now we have hit that kind of forever profile that we want to keep pretty consistent.
Mm-hmm. And I think I read you guys also make a Caribbean rum. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any opportunity where you're going to kind of play with those two spirits together, where you're going to put, old line American single malt in a rum cask, and put the rum in an old line American single malt cask, and kind of play off of each other like that?
100%. We've done that and we love it. So one of the, well, as for the reasons we did it with the rum, there's a number of reasons, one of which we're former Navy guys, and rum's kind of part of the Navy culture. We love barrel-aged spirits in general. So when we were starting out and looking to see what other spirits could complement our portfolio and help us grow the business, for us, a barrel-aged rum made a lot of sense, because we found a blender who could help us make this amazing blend. We have access to barrels. Anyway, there's a lot of reasons we did it. And one of the big things we were excited about is, like many people, we were familiar with the Caribbean cask concept of, from like Balvenie and things like that. Loved what they were doing, and we've done that as well. So we take that blend of rum comes to us a minimum of 7 years old, up to 11 years old. So, in the rum world, as you may know, aging can be a little bit squirrely. We're very adamant. Our blender knows that the youngest barrel he buys is 7, because we want to make sure we do an age statement the way the whiskey world does it. So it comes to us already aged at least 7 years, up to 11, 12 years. And then the blend comes to us, and a portion of that we set aside to go into our freshly emptied malt casks. And then to your point, when those get emptied, we put single malt back in them. So it's a really nice thing. We've actually had several stores buy a barrel of American single malt, taste the rum, say, hey, just take that same barrel, fill it with rum for 8 months or a year, empty that, and then put whiskey back in it. So people have done like that 1, 2, 3 in the same barrel, and it's kind of a fun project.
And I think, rum definitely makes sense, because if all you have to do is look at history. At one point, rum was a part of the daily rations for the United States Navy, and it transitioned to whiskey only because cost, right? Like when people started distilling whiskey in the United States, it became cheaper than using Caribbean rum as your daily ration, and we got to be fiscally responsible. So it makes a ton of sense. I get that, and I know we're getting close on time, but tell me a little bit about the Ohana blend.
Yeah, so the Ohana blend, the whiskey itself is a 50-50 blend of our American single malt finished in cognac casks and American single malt finished in Armagnac casks. And it's two of our really special finishes we've done, and it came into a really nice blend. So we're very proud of the product. But the reason that the name Ohana was applied to it, and the reason that the bottle really exists, is that we, in the past about year and a half, via our mutual friend Tracy at SSPR, were introduced to a gentleman named Paul Lore, who's a former Marine, lives down in Florida now. And a couple of years ago, he had the crazy idea to get together a team and to row an open boat across the Atlantic from, I think it was Florida to Spain or Portugal or wherever it was, to raise money for 2 causes. One was a children's cancer research fund, and one is an organization called Canines for Warriors, which, as the name would suggest, they train service dogs for veterans in need and at risk of suicide, and pair up veterans with those dogs. They're a great organization. So we met Paul about a year ago because he was doing a second row, this time across the Pacific from California to Hawaii. And the name Team Ohana was used. I believe Ohana means family. And we just fell in love with what they were doing. I mean, a guy who'd never rowed a boat in his life decides to row across an ocean. How can you not get kind of behind that? And so the Ohana blend, every penny of profit from that, it's $100 bottle, of which I'm going to say $85 per bottle goes to we just cover our costs, and the rest of it goes to Canines for Warriors, and now we've since partnered with Canines for Warriors every year we do a kind of Veterans Day promotion where we pick an organization and work with them and try to support them. So this is our first year, and probably hopefully many years, working with Canines for Warriors, where in select markets and via our website, anybody who buys a bottle between now and the end of the year, $5 from that bottle of whiskey goes to Canines for Warriors. So we found an organization that we feel strongly about, and they're fun to work with and they're fun to support.
Yeah. And I know we're right at time, so I'm going to leave kind of one last question here for you. I think tonight you guys are going to be at a Rye Revival event in Maryland, and I don't know if that's a sold out event or not, but if anybody, wants awareness, maybe they probably need to look to this to next year, because this episode won't be out before you guys go to the event. But you're going to be debuting, and we had an opportunity to talk about this a little bit offline, so it's not like I knew this. You just told me about it 10 minutes ago. But you'll be previewing a rye whiskey that may eventually become a very, very limited but recurring offering. And so kind of tell me a little bit about this event, and what your participation kind of means for this particular recurring offering.
Sure. So the Rye Revival event, the idea is it's the Maryland Distillers Guild, of which we are a member, has been part of, they're a wonderful organization. One of the things that the Guild has advanced over the past couple of years and secured into law, I guess it was this year, was that rye whiskey is officially the state spirit of Maryland. And Maryland, many of your listeners may know, but some might not, that historically Maryland and Pennsylvania were big rye whiskey producing states. They actually had different styles of rye whiskey, but both of the states were. So Maryland, it's historically a big spirit produced here. And so Old Line, our path is American single malt. But we found a way that we could tap into that culture and kind of be a part of that in a way that was very true to what our company does. And the way we're doing that is we've actually partnered with a brewery called Monument City Brewing. They're about 2 blocks from here, and they make a wonderful beer called 51 Rye, which is 51% rye and 49% malted barley. And we partnered with them to have them produce the mash, and we get the wort. And it's basically the same thing they used to make their beer without the hops. And then we ferment it and distill it here in Baltimore. So we've got I think it's a 2-year-old straight rye. It's going to age longer, but that's where it's at now, that we're kind of teasing out tonight. So it's our way of being part of that rye culture in Maryland, but in a way that is kind of cool and different. That most ryes are, as you know, probably anywhere from 70 to 95 to 100% rye and a little bit of corn, maybe a little malt mixed in. But we're going heavy in the malt because we're malt guys, and it's a fun project. So we're really pleased with how it's coming along, and it will be a recurring. We're actually going to distill some more here in a few weeks, so it's going to be a recurring thing over the years, but limited.
That's I can only imagine. I've had the opportunity to taste both the Navy Strength and the Flagship, and their phenomenal American single malts. And you guys probably hear that regularly, but American single malt's a broad category, and there's some really great stuff out there, and there's some stuff that just needs some development. And you guys are it feels like at the top of the game. So I can only imagine this rye is going to be fantastic as well.
Thank you.
Will it be available for online purchase, or is this going to be a local distillery only release?
That's a really good question. The answer is I don't know. We will be releasing it. The first release will be, we have an annual event called a spring. We have a spring fling and a fall fling. And they're just parties we throw at the distillery. And so this will be released at the spring fling in 2024. So next spring, specific date TBD. So definitely at the distillery. And if I had to guess right now, we'd probably put a couple of cases on the website as well. But I don't want to say anything I can't back off from. So put a little asterisk next to that statement.
Yeah, I'll put an asterisk there. That's merely for my own personal curiosity.
Sure.
Because The anything that departs from 95.5 rye, I'm ready to taste, right? Because there's
Well,
a
let's
lot of stuff out there that's that. So
regardless of where it lands on the website or not, let's stay in touch and we'll make sure we get you
yeah,
some to try.
absolutely. So, Mark, I have more questions, but we're already over time a little bit. I appreciate the time. It's very, very, very apparent that you guys are doing all of the right things, both from a business and from a product standpoint. And I could only imagine, you guys have some serious credentials coming from, Johns Hopkins and Darden School of Business. Those are both phenomenal educational institutions, and so the business is going to be on point. But you've been able to develop a fantastic product as well, at least in my opinion. And
Thanks.
that's that, and a dollar will get you a newspaper, maybe. My opinion in the dollar. So, but thank you so much for the time, the opportunity to talk about what you guys have, and the ability to taste it. It's been super fun.
Well, John, thank you so much. This is enjoy the conversation. This is the it still amazes me that that guys like you want to talk to guys like me. That you guys like what we're doing. It means a lot to me that you do, and just thank you for taking the time to talk to us. This is great.
Yeah, I think we're on the exact opposite side of that, where we're surprised that folks who are busy trying to run a business and be successful are willing to stop and take time to talk to the whiskey nerds that sit in a room in the dark with a microphone and effectively talk to themselves,
Hey,
right?
no,
Like you're
I
going to
love
hop
it
on. So,
anytime. So thank you,
yeah,
and
yeah,
hopefully we'll do it again.
absolutely. Thanks for tuning in to this offering from Embellish Pod. If you enjoyed this, please leave me a review on whatever platform that you're consuming this on. Leave a comment if possible. Hit me up on social media at TikTok or Instagram using Embellish Pod, and give me a follow so you can keep up with what's going on here. I can be found at www.embellishpod.com. It's all of my links, accounts, and contact details. Thanks for stopping by.